have selected all the winners of all the games except one for the best tweet. Justin is very busy selecting the best tweet person of the conference. We have just 30 minutes for that. So keep your tweets going, and we'll be declaring the winner soon. Now, it's a time to call our closing keynote speaker, a guy who doesn't need an introduction, who's sitting behind humbly, the co-founder and the CEO of WSO2, Sanjiva Weerawarana.
Okay, good evening, and thank you for inviting me. So I was asked to talk a little bit about the future of the Sri Lankan developers. So I'll try to touch upon some of my thoughts about that, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to take it whenever. So let's start with kind of understanding, what's special about a Sri Lankan developer. So Sri Lanka has we are a small country. We don't have that many people in the software industry, but interestingly, actually, there are more people as a percentage of the population in the Sri Lankan software industry than there in India. Right? So that's kind of weird, right? So India has so many people working in the software industry, but if you look at the population percentage, we have more people programming here than there are in India. Right? So I don't know whether it's I am the opposite of quantity over quality. So I don't like big numbers. For me, a few people can do a hell of a lot of stuff. So the reason I brought that up is because the argument that Sri Lankan software industry needs to have more people in order to compete in the industry, and that we just need to train hundreds and hundreds and thousands and whatever of people, is not the right solution, because realistically, not everybody in the world wants to be or should be a programmer. There's a lot more fun things for people to do than sitting and writing code, right? So for the people who love writing that's exactly what you should do. If you don't love doing that, you shouldn't do that. But at the same time, if you look at numbers, if somebody wants to start up an office in Sri Lanka and hire 10,000 engineers, you can't do that, basically. You'll have to bankrupt a bunch of companies in order to get 10,000 engineers, because there aren't 10,000 engineers to hire. You go to India, you want to hire 10,000 engineers, you can do it like that, right? You just, there are hundreds and hundreds and thousands of engineers. So Sri Lankan developers' opportunity then is not to necessarily go and do large-scale things that require lots and lots of people, but focus on things that are a lot more creating higher value, right? So our software industry, if you look at the global software industry and what we do primarily, so Sri Lanka, like India and like most other countries in this part of the world, is not a leader in creating products. Right? In fact, if you look at every software brand, if you look at all the brands that are mentioned here in that slide in the thing over there, and so forth, or any software brands you can name, 90% of them are US brands, and there's a very small number of European brands, but there are no software brands from this part of the world, right? I see Tata there, but Tata is not a software brand, right? I assume that's TCS, but maybe it's all of Tata, but anyway, it doesn't matter. They're service companies, they're not software companies. So most things from this part of the world tends to be service companies. It's changing. India in particular has a massive market, so there are lots and lots of software companies coming up. But still, it's a far off from replacing an IBM or an Oracle or whatever with something which is a brand that has been born and bred in this part of the world. And that'll happen, but it's very, very slow. So so if you look at the value chain in the software industry, the value for software comes from selling intellectual property, from selling something that is unique, something that is owned by someone, something that nobody else has, and something that makes somebody else very productive. The services model of basically getting paid for work, end of the day is 1 hour of work is 1 hour of money. That's it. You can't do 1 hour of work and sell it to 10 people. Right? Actually, maybe you could, because I don't know if you guys read, there was a story about a developer in California. This guy, he was getting paid in California, and he would outsource all his work to somebody else. And he would sit and play games the whole day, and his work gets checked in at the end of the day, because he was getting it done somewhere else. Right? So that's kind of a situation where he got a bunch of other people to do it, but that's not a practical reality at scale, obviously. So So if you're an engineer in this part of the world, if you want to create a higher value offering, we got to move beyond services. We got to go into things creating that are much more high value, much more sort of direct impact on the people who are using something and getting some value out of it. Right? So one of the things that I always encourage people to think about is what are the things that bother you? What are the things that you want to do something about, and then go and try to do something about it. So in a software engineering world, it's very easy to, if you work somewhere, you get if you get a task saying you got to go implement this, solve this problem, it's a mathematical problem, it's an algorithmic problem, it's a whatever coding problem. You can work through it and figure it out and implement it. But it's a lot harder to come up with something that other people might want to use and might want to pay for, might want to pay repeatedly for, and so forth, right? But that's a real opportunity. So if you look at the software industry from a global perspective, every country in the world is trying to become a software provider, because there's a guy called Richard Stallman. I hope you guys know who he is. He's the one who started the Free Software Foundation. Richard Stallman used to have this thing called, he makes a statement about software colonialism. So software is like a new drug that everybody needs, right? We all need it. And so if you buy it from somewhere else, you're addicted to the drug and you have no control over the drug. So that's part of the reason why I'm a big fan of open source software. Because with open source software, even if you are taking somebody else's drug, you can hack that drug a little bit, right? If you know what you're doing, you can get in there and you can improve it, you can make it better, you can make it worse, you can do all kinds of stuff. Whereas if it's not open source, you have no control at all. You can keep paying for it and use it, and that's it. And of course, if you are a non-tech company and you want to use IT for productivity improvement, for improved whatever, yes, absolutely, pay and buy that thing and use it. That's nothing wrong with it. But if you're a technical person, you should always look at that and say, well, how can I create something better? How can I do something which is more creative, more innovative, more productive, more value than whatever the thing that I'm getting. And the reality with software is that unlike, if you want to make a car, you want to make an airplane, you want to make something which is massively physical and so forth, you need a lot of infrastructure. In the software industry, if you want to come up with something better, you need a brain, which all of you guys here have plenty of. You need a computer, which everybody has. You need internet connection. That's it, right? The rest of it is just hard work and passion and energy and creativity and thinking. So the opportunity for Sri Lankan developers to compete in the world is just as open as any other developer to compete in the world, right? But yet, if you look at all the major innovations that have happened that changed the world in the last 10, 15 years, or 20 years, let's say, they've all come from California for the most part, whether it was the web or, well, web actually didn't come from California, it came from Switzerland originally. And the web browser, all these innovations, Facebook, et cetera, they're all things coming out of California, Silicon Valley. That's why Silicon Valley is so sort of arrogant in some ways in the way they think about the world. If you follow what people from Silicon Valley have been saying since yesterday after Trump won, it's almost hilarious, the mindset about their views. But anyway, I'm a Trump fan, by the way. So the point is, the software industry doesn't limit anybody from participating, yet we limit ourselves from participating at that level, right? So in certain areas in the technology stack today, in particular in analytics, and also very much now in AI-related stuff, all the work is happening in open source, in an open way. Right? All the innovation in analytics, literally everything in analytics is completely open source. Right? Where and now building on that, because AI is a lot of stuff built on analytics in various forms, almost all AI work is being done openly. And so that what that means is, if you want to be a part of sort of the current and the next 5-10 years of sort of rapid innovation in software, it's going to come in the form of analytics and AI applied to various kind of things. The opportunity to participate in that is present for everybody, right? Yet we don't participate enough. There's no limitation. Anybody can go and participate in those projects. Anybody can go and download that stuff. Not just download, you can go and contribute, you can come up with ideas, you can learn, and so forth. So let me talk briefly about learning. Now, there was a time when if you wanted to learn certain things, when I went to university, I went to a small university in the US called Kent State University. There was a library. I'm not a book reader type, but there was a library, there's all kinds of stuff there. And if you went to MIT, there was a much bigger library. There were all kinds of books there that weren't there in other places. Today, it doesn't matter where you go, right? The library is the same for everybody because the library is the web. It's Google Scholar, it's whatever. You can find anything you want within a fraction of a second. So the information that is available for anybody for learning is equal globally now. Also, I hope everybody here has heard about edX and Coursera and Udacity and Khan Academy and all these places that have incredible amount of content on basically any topic, completely available free of charge. Right? Yeah. For some things, if you want the actual certification, you might need to pay something. But for most things, if you just want to learn a topic, whether it is machine learning or whatever the topic is, there is freely available content that anybody can go and learn from. So what that means is if you want to go and participate in an AI project so say Google TensorFlow, right? Google releases something called TensorFlow, which is a neural network simulation environment and a bunch of other things. If you want to participate in that and you don't know what neural networks are, how to program them and so forth, there are 3 or 4 classes that are available at Coursera or edX, and you can just take them, right? And they have assignments, they have projects, and you don't have to pay anything. And they're being taught usually by a very good professor from a very good university. So in other words, the ability to learn continuously is completely within us now. Earlier, even 10, 15 years ago, to go and learn something, you had to go to a class, you had to go to a course, you have to do a lot more stuff. Now, you want to learn, basically stop being lazy, right? If you're not lazy, you can learn. You just, browse over to a website, type something, there's a video lecture series available, and there's stuff you can read, there's assignments, the software you need for that is downloadable, everybody's got a computer, everybody's got an internet connection, etc., etc. So there's no limitation on making yourself someone who knows technology at least at the same level as anybody else in the world, right? And Sri Lanka has a massive advantage that, relative to most other countries which are non-English speaking, we have a high English speaking standard, right? We're not, even compared to a lot of European countries, we have a pretty good English speaking standard. So that's a big help because a lot of this content is obviously in English. And if you don't know English, again, there's a whole bunch of English teaching stuff that you can go and teach yourself in English, right? But if you're not comfortable in English, that's the first thing. You want to compete in the world today, go learn English, right? Simple as that. So if you're not familiar enough with English, take a class, read, do whatever you need to do. But you got to get comfortable enough English so you can have a fight in English. Right? It's the most important point. You have to be able to debate in English without translating it in your brain. Right? When you get to that point, you're good enough in English. It doesn't matter what the accent is. That's all bullshit. That doesn't matter. But if you can hold an argument in English, you're good. So once you've learned so then the continuous education part is a very important part. And actually, it's not just continuous education. There's a university called University of the People, which has a complete degree program available free of charge, and you have to pay money if you want the certification, but it's completely available for anybody. I think Arizona State University, the first year undergraduate curriculum is completely available free of charge for anybody. And their rule is if you want to go to the second year, you can do the first year online and come and join the second year. And you need to pay like $1,700 for the first year in that case, if you're going to join. If not, it's free. Harvard, if you want to go and study the computer science, the first year computer science program in Harvard is completely online at edX, etc. So there's a lot of content available for teaching yourself anything these days. So the opportunity for us as engineers is basically it's completely open. How far you want to go and learn, how far you want to go and challenge the world, how far you want to become a leader in the world in creative thinking, in technology, is completely up to you and up to me, right? It's no longer a question of, well, if I was in California, I'd be able to do that. If I was in London, I'd be able to do that. If I was in Stockholm, I'd be able to do that. It's not that anymore. It is now, how much time and effort and energy do I want to put into this? And if I put energy into that, I can pick it up. Because whatever I don't know is available online and free of charge, and I can just learn it, right? So for me, the opportunity that in front of us for Sri Lankan engineering is not really worrying about large-scale things, right? Not in terms of having hundreds and thousands of people doing things, because that's a dying market anyway. So let me talk briefly about that. AI, so there's just yesterday, about 2 days ago, I tweeted an article that there was a US government, US military project, which is, it's called Creating a Smart Soldier. Basically, there's a bunch of YouTube videos and there's things you can buy where if you can apply electrical signals to your brain, it makes you slightly smarter. Right? Basically, it increases focus. Right? This is a well-studied phenomenon. There are things you can buy, but generally, you're not supposed to. Don't go and plug a 9-volt battery into your brain and see what happens, right? That's probably not a good idea. But there is actually a program now in the US military which is applying this to soldiers to make them smarter, right? To make them have more awareness, more understanding of the environment, and so forth. And the US soldiers are usually the guinea pigs for all this kind of stuff. If you go and look in the 1950s, they did all kinds of psychological experiments on them and so forth. So right now, the new experiments are on, plugging in a little bit of electricity into the brain and seeing how far you can push a person. Now, so the competitive, so what that is going is, and if you look at where AI is going, now there's something called exoskeletons which are letting people becoming stronger, basically where you wear something outside which carries most of the weight, so you can do things that you cannot physically do otherwise. All the robotic stuff, all the simulation, and so forth. What it means basically is this business of, and if you look at even like self-driving cars, any job that is mechanical or repetitive is gone, right? So what that means is, the fundamentals of BPO. For example, if you order a pizza in Texas, it's answered in India, right? Well, very soon it'll be answered by IBM Watson or something like that, right? Because IBM Watson will do just as well as anybody else. Recently, there was a release by Microsoft Research which said that they had achieved human-level parity for software transcription. Right? Now, I'm not an expert in software transcription, but apparently this is a hard problem to transcribe what somebody says into actual text and get it right. And the software that they have developed has now achieved completely human-level parity. That means there's nobody who can do it better than that the program can do. Right? Now, there's programs that will generate poetry. There's programs that will do creative writing. There's that story about that guy who wrote some software to do a lawyer thing dealing with parking permits or something in UK. The point is, a country which depends on hundreds of thousands being employed doing mundane work that you get from somewhere else because you can do it cheaper is not in a good position. So luckily, we are not in that position. Because given another 10 years, those jobs won't be available because you don't need those jobs. You just program the damn thing and it just works anyway, and it doesn't go on strike. You don't have to pay it. You don't have to feed it. You just, it just keeps running. So the software opportunity, so for us, what we need to look at is not trying to save those jobs, but to outprogram those jobs, basically. Right? Because luckily, Sri Lanka is not that dependent on the sort of low-end employment opportunities in BPO-related things. Right now, we are very dependent on other areas. Do you know what Sri Lanka's #1 private employer is? Anybody know? What's the largest employer in Sri Lanka? Which job? 3-wheel drivers. So we have 1 million plus 3-wheel drivers. That's the largest employer in Sri Lanka. So if we ever have self-drive 3-wheelers, we have a major problem. Right? Of course, getting a self-drive vehicle to drive in Sri Lanka will take a couple of more generations probably, but that's a different matter. So, actually, US is having a different problem. US, there's now self-drive trucks, right? Mercedes is demonstrating a self-drive truck in the US right now. Tesla is building one. Whatever that other Chinese company, EZV or whatever, I can't remember the name, they're building one. The #1 employer in the US is truck drivers. 3.4 million people are employed driving trucks, right? hey, a robotic truck driver is a hell of a lot better and more reliable than a human truck driver because the guy doesn't fall asleep. You don't need to give it food. You don't need to take a break. Anything. It's a much better system. So capitalism will absolutely drive that down there. Now in Sri Lanka, we are a little bit better off because the cost structures don't work yet. But the point is the future that we are heading into is much more driven by people like us programming the hell out of other people's jobs. Right? So it's fine as long as you're on this side and not the other side. So if you're on the other side, it's a bit of a problem because you're going to get programmed away. But if you're programming the programmer, then you're okay. Now, if we ever program a robot on how to program, then we're all finished. So let's not do that part. Right? But it'll take a little bit of time. So probably not in our lifetime, maybe in another generation or another lifetime it'll happen. It will happen, but it's not right now, so we don't have to worry about it yet. And by the way, there's a group that was formed to try to manage AI ethics because all the software companies in the US are beginning to realize that the government will step in and start controlling what you can program. In genetic research, for example, a long time ago, President Bush, I think when he was in power, he banned stem cell research because stem cell research has stem cells are the cells that create other cells, so it's sort of like life creating stuff. So, you're kind of playing around with building human beings basically, or building parts. Anyway, now stem cell research continued everywhere else. So stem cell research is actually very promising. You can, recreate a heart. You can create basically plug and play part replacement, right? But like that, if something gets out of beyond control, usually public sector government has to step in and put some rules saying, no, you can't do that. You can do this, you can't do that, etc. So to prevent that from happening, all the AI leading companies got together and formed an organization about a month ago. I can't remember the name of it, to basically try to say, we're going to self-regulate ourselves so we don't do bad things with software. And now this is like expecting the banks to self-regulate themselves, which is the reason why 2008 crash happened basically, because they really don't self-regulate themselves very well. But so it is, what's happening with software is inevitable, but that's also an opportunity for us, because there are many things that, if you look at Sri Lanka as a country, there are many things that we can't do in the world of software because it just takes more work than we can generate. But if we improve ourselves to a point where we create things, not just actually just program, but we create programs that create programs to some extent, or reduce the amount of need for work by creating more high value things, then we can compete for anything, because then we can actually just create something which is able to do the work that you would need 500 people to do earlier. You can do it with 20 people. Right? So that's really where the opportunity for Sri Lankan software is, in my view, going forward, is not focus on quantity, not focus on getting things that require a lot of people, but more focus on creating high-value ideas, high-value technology, high-value approaches that can produce a lot of value in a very, very short time. Right? And to do that, basically it requires continuous education, so you always stay on top of what's going on in the world. So if you don't spend, on average, when I interview people from university, I always ask them, like, how much time do you spend reading stuff on the internet? And I say, not looking at cat videos on Facebook, but like reading useful stuff on the internet. Right? Most people don't spend even 1 hour a day on it. I think I spend 3 to 4 hours a day reading stuff on the net. Right? And that ranges from social things to political things to financial things to legal things to technology things to whatever. Anything that sort of relates and so forth that is relevant to the way the world is going to be. Because if you don't do that, you don't know what's going to come up, and you won't know how to react, you won't know how to respond to it, you don't know how to take advantage of it. Right? So continuously spending time to be plugged in to what's going on in the world is absolutely critical. Being fully conversant in English is a huge advantage here that most countries don't have. In order for us to do that, all we need is we have an internet connection, we have a computer, then you have patience and time beyond that, right? So in order to continue to compete and really get ahead in a global situation, for us to move from where we are to a next level, let me give you some another set of views. So Sri Lankan per capita GDP right now is $3,800 per person per year, the average per capita GDP, right? That's I think 1,200 to 12,000 or whatever is considered middle income country. So we are doing pretty well compared to most countries in our region. India is like at 1,600 if I remember right, or 1,800 or something like that. But it's still, we are obviously far from, what are considered developed countries, right? So in order to get there, so how do you create higher value things? So if you look at software industry, we still have, in Sri Lanka right now, we have people who finish a 4-year computer science degree who get a job for 30,000 rupees, right? So 30,000 rupees is under $250 a month, okay? And to me, that's silly. We don't produce that many engineers. We should be competing and creating things that allow a much higher income opportunity for people. So the only way you can earn more is if you create things that are going to produce more value than if you create things that are producing less value. If somebody is selling your time for, $25 an hour, that's barely above minimum wage in the US. That's why people come and buy it from here. But that's not, that'll basically mean you're competing for the low end opportunity. Right? So we have as a country, we actually have many of our industries. If you look at, so what's our number one foreign exchange earner? Middle East, right? People working in the Middle East. Okay, so I mean, this is a national shame in some sense because most of the people working in the Middle East are doing really, really low-end jobs, earning $100, $200, maybe $300 or something. But they're absolutely keeping the country afloat. They send, I can't remember, $7 billion a year? Now, something like that, I can't remember the number. So they are a critical component. But again, Middle East is in a very bad situation, right? And all kinds of problems going on and so forth. But let's leave that alone. But now when you go beyond that, I think number 2 is tea yet, right? And tea, again, we tend to produce, most of our tea is bulk tea, right? We pluck it off the tree, it gets cut, dried, put into boxes overnight, and it's in the port next morning, right? So very little value addition, except for like few brands. Dilma, of course, is the most famous one, but there are a bunch of companies now that are adding value and actually selling, tea in smaller bags instead of bigger bags that we go and bring back even in some cases. So the problem is when you don't add value, now you see, if you read the papers recently, you see what's going on in the tea industry. People in the tea industry are struggling because the workers get almost nothing. I mean, they get like 700 rupees a day is the salary for those guys, right? And if you want to increase that, so now there's a question of whether the plantation companies are paying fair, blah, blah. Okay, let's keep that aside for a second. If you want to increase that, you have to convert from taking the tea leaves off the plant during the day and getting it out of the country by next morning to something that adds more value, right? So then you can convert it. And because the price difference from a kilogram of tea that you send in bulk versus a kilogram of tea that you put into small bags and you send to various places is huge. It's an incredible difference. Then if you look at, I think the next one might be garment exports, right? Again, we tend to produce, we have, I think like 3 companies that are more than $1 billion in revenue, and they are great employers, they do all kinds of cool stuff, but still, I don't know how much you know about the garment industry. The salaries range from, 15 to 25,000, maybe 30,000 rupees a month when you work in a factory as entry level, right? Again, very low. And why do people send, let me give you an example. I won't name the product or the company because then you'll know who it is. There's a particular piece of clothing that is made in Sri Lanka which is sold in the US for $59.90. It's made completely in Sri Lanka. I've been to the factory that makes it. There are about 15 people in a manufacturing line, maybe from that wall to here, that assemble the thing from beginning to end. And the last person, does quality checking, irons it, packages it, puts a label, puts a price, wraps it into plastic packaging, individually packaged, and puts into a small plastic box, cardboard box, and addresses it directly to the warehouse of that particular store, and they get $7 per unit, right? So, when you get $7 per unit, you can't pay people that much more. The reason for that is we are not the driver in that market. We are just, say, a cog in the wheel. We are part of the, this is partly why Trump won, right? This whole globalization, anyway, that's a whole other, I won't get started on my politics. So, In order to get beyond that, in order to get, you see the same story happening in China with iPhone. You know, you pay $700 for an iPhone, the thing costs $150, and Foxconn gets, I can't remember, like $20, $25 per iPhone, or some tiny amount, right? And that's why Apple is the richest company. By the way, Apple has more money in the bank than the US Treasury, usually. Right? They have $250 billion of cash sitting around Apple. So the way all this stuff works is, if you want to get the higher value and get paid more, then you have to do something different. You have to do something at higher value. So I don't come from a very rich family or anything like that. My father worked in Oman for 10 years. That's how I went to the US, and so forth. So there's a lot of people who leave the country for economic reasons, right? Because if you live in Sri Lanka completely, and unless you have family wealth of some kind, it becomes very difficult to, you know, buy a house. Actually, buying a car requires more than buying a house in Sri Lanka now. But you know, the sort of moving forward in life becomes very difficult here if you don't have something else. So a lot of people leave the country. But when you leave the country and go work somewhere else, we are losing typically the best brains in Sri Lanka, right? We lose people who are, you know, who are very capable, who go and work somewhere else, who are very passionate, go and contribute to the development of some other economy, which is fine for that individual. Absolutely, and if somebody wants to go, I totally help them go. I have ever any hesitation to let people, to encourage people to leave if that's what's right for them. At the same time, if you want to fix that problem on a long-term basis, the only approach is to improve the economic environment for engineers. Because the thing with computer science people is we have the most portable job in the world. Right? There are no local qualifications required. There are no certifications. There is no professional certification concept. Right? You know how to program, you're hired. That's it. Right? And actually, whether you even have a degree or not is not that relevant. If you can prove that you know how to program, you can get a job anywhere in the world. So as a result, it's very, very portable. That's why people leave quite a bit. Right? It's slightly better now than it was about 10 years ago. But still, we have a lot of people who are leaving for economic reasons. So all of those, in order to get past all of those, is to become a provider of technology at a higher level, not at this lower level. Right? So in order to get there, is basically the ball's in our hands. If you want to become a higher value creator, you need to learn more. You need to be able to stand up in front of anybody else and teach them something. You don't, and the reality is there's nothing that holds me back or holds you back from doing that except ourselves. Right? So if you want to learn something today, everything is in front of you. If you want to work hard, it's up to you. If you want to compete and communicate and interact with anybody else in the world, it's all available, right? You go join a mailing list in one of the projects, you can read stuff, etc. Right? And in fact, even if you don't contribute, just by joining the mailing list and watching the conversations, it's incredibly useful. I'll tell you one story from something that I did. This is about 1989 or 1990. I think some of you guys are not, well, many of you guys are not even born yet. So I was a grad student at the time, and there was something called the Free Software Foundation. I told you about Richard Stallman. They had this thing called the GNU project, the GNU project. The GNU project's mission was to create an entire software environment in a free mode, right? Under the free software GPL, the GNU public license. And they had, by then they had the C library, they had the GCC, they had G++, they had all these GDB, they had all the tools, essentially all the library functionality was there. The only thing that was missing was the kernel. Right? There was no operating system kernel available in a free license at the time. There was BSD, the Berkeley System Software Distribution kernel, but that's not on a GPL compatible license. So Richard Stallman didn't want to use it. So they actually started a project called GNU Herd. Right? They had a person who was leading it. This is before Linux, by the way. Okay? So this is in 1989, 1990. And GNU Herd was going to be a microkernel kernel for Unix, basically Unix kernel. Right? And when that project was started, there were lots of, there was a mailing list, there were lots of discussions, and so forth. So I'm not an operating system developer. I've written a small operating system, but I'm not like a kernel hacker type, right? But so I joined the mailing list, and you learn so much from just observing the conversations about people who really know stuff about how to do paging, how to do memory management, how to do security levels, protection, all kinds of stuff, just by reading messages written by people who really know their shit, basically, right? So I didn't even contribute anything. I was just watching. And yet I learned so much from it. And of course, GNU had eventually never made it because Linus Torvalds went and wrote Linux around the same time in parallel, and then he open sourced that and they got married, and Linux basically, what we call Linux now is actually, it should be called GNU Linux, because Linus only wrote the kernel part of it. The rest of the platform actually came from the GNU project, right? But it doesn't matter, it's still called Linux. Anyway, so the point is, you learn a hell of a lot just by hanging around with people who know stuff. And in today's world, you can hang around with people who know stuff by simply joining a mailing list, right? Or you join the IRC channel or the Slack channel now these days, or whatever the thing it is. And when technical conversations happen, you learn from just observing and listening to that without having to even participate. And if you have the time and the energy, you should volunteer and do something. So I'm a person who tends to sort of overcommit myself and go and volunteer for all kinds of things. So the first time I got involved with that was related to Sri Lanka was in 1989, 88. There was something called SLNet at the time, Sri Lanka Net, which is how we used to distribute news about Sri Lanka. At that time, obviously, there was a war going on here, but Sri Lanka was an irrelevant country for the US and so forth, so there was no news about Sri Lanka. There was one guy, Nimal Ratnayaka, he is now a professor in University of Peradeniya. He was a grad student in New York. He had a shortwave radio, and he would listen to BBC News and type it and mail to everybody, right? And then we had to distribute that mail to all the people there, and so we set up some mechanism to distribute mail. And then Professor Gihan Dias is now professor in Morotua. He started setting up the email link to Sri Lanka, and at one point he asked, saying he wanted somebody to come and help the guys in University of Morotua who was running the mail server to set it, configure it at the time, and get it going in Morotua to get connected to the thing that they were setting. It was UUCP transfer. Maybe UUCP is something called Unix to Unix copy, which is it's actually a file transfer protocol, but it was a protocol for delivering email as well over dial-up phones. And so I was coming to Sri Lanka. I said, oh yeah, I can go and help. Now, I didn't even know SMTP and send mail configuration really that well at the time. But I went and learned it. I was a grad student at Purdue at the time, and I spoke to the Purdue system administrator, and he helped me out, and he told me all kinds of stuff. I went and learned a bunch of stuff. Then I got involved with it, and from then on, got really, and at one point I was delivering all the mail to Sri Lanka through the machine I had at home there, basically. Every day we would call Sri Lanka and deliver email, right? So if you want to do something, a lot of people say, well, I don't know that, can't get involved because I'm not an expert in that thing. I don't know that. And the reality is that's bullshit. You don't need to know all that stuff. What you need is the commitment to say, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to go and solve that problem. If you don't know something, go learn it, right? So when you get an opportunity, don't ever, if you want to go forward and if you want to change Sri Lanka's position and change the future of Sri Lankan developers, don't stop and say, well, I'm not an expert in that, so I don't want to get involved in it. Right? Now, don't make a fool out of yourself. You're not an expert. You don't have to go and be loud. Right? You can go and just listen and learn. And then you can say, yeah, you want something done, I'll do it. I'm going to have to go figure it out, but I'll happily go and figure it out and do it. Right? So really, that's the thing that a lot of people often forget. People complain when they're older, say, well, I never got the chance, I never got the opportunity, and so forth. But most of the time, everybody gets opportunities. Most people just let them go because they're lazy, because it looks too complicated, it looks too much work, it's sort of too challenging, not in my little knowledge space, so I don't want to venture out. Right? Just everybody gets opportunities all the time. When you get an opportunity, it's up to you. You can look at the opportunity and say, it looks too painful, let it go. Or you can say, that's an opportunity, I'm going to jump in there. Right? I'm going to go head first, take the risk, maybe my neck gets chopped off, so what? It's okay, you can do it again then, right? It's not physically chopped off, so it's okay. Like that. So when you get a chance to do something, if you want to move forward in life, take the chance, right? Whether it is a new technology thing, or whether it is to go and contribute to something, whether it is to go and participate in some project, whether it is to go and learn something, create some content, whatever. Right? Create that, take that chance and get out there and do something. And the worst case, so actually there's an interesting comment about that. Srinath Perera, who's the head of research in WSO2, he made this comment that the great thing with making predictions is there's no downside, because if you predict something and you're wrong, nobody remembers you predicted it. If you predicted something and you're right, everybody says, that guy predicted it, look at that. He was really smart. So you have nothing to lose, right? So it's like that. In many things, often you have nothing to lose except personal, bullshit, basically. So if you just say, look, okay, I'm going to do this, what's the worst case that can happen? Okay, I don't go further anywhere on that topic. Well, okay, nothing lost, right? Because you're not going to go further anywhere on that topic if you don't do it anyway. So you have no literally you have nothing to lose in that situation. So you can just go out and do what you want to do and be done with it. So, my advice to people is, if you want to think about the future of the Sri Lankan developer, this is a personal choice thing for you, for me, for everybody in this room, and everybody not in this room. In terms of what you want to do, what you want to become, how much you want to work at it, these are all personal choices. And in life, everything is a trade-off. It's a sacrifice. If you spend time doing this, you don't have time to do something else. So it's a commitment you got to make, saying I want to get ahead in something. I want to become somebody in the world. The opportunity is there. Right? There was a time when if you lived in Sri Lanka, you didn't get the opportunity. So one other point I want to make before I wrap up, which is empathy. So one of the things that if you want to compete and you want to create something that other people want to use and do, you have to understand what their pain is. So that's his concept of empathy. Being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes, understanding the world from their point of view, then you can solve their problem. Right? So if you want to be an entrepreneur, a lot of people say, oh, entrepreneurs are creative people, all kinds of bullshit like that. That's completely BS. To me, entrepreneur basically means there's something that really pisses you off and you want to do something about it. Right? So that's the best kind of putting yourself into the other shoes, because you are in the shoes already. Okay? So you don't have to imagine the problem. You are feeling the problem and you want to solve it because you have the tools to solve it. You have the technical domain, you have the whatever tools you need, and you have the persistence and the care and the passion to go out and solve it. Right? So that's the part that's where empathy comes in. So often people who, when you work in engineering, in engineering capacity, we have to solve problems for other people. Right? Most of the time we're solving problems for other people. When you do that, if you want to solve it really, really well, what you have to be able to do is look at the problem from the person who's experiencing the problem's point of view. If you understand that, then you can solve the problem. If you don't understand that, you want requirements. So in WSO2, when we do stuff, if somebody asks me saying, what are the requirements, I go nuts. Because I don't know the requirements. We are creating tools to help other people stuff. We have to figure out what the requirements are. If you give me requirements and you want me to write it, you're waiting for your job to be programmed away. Right? Because if I can specify requirements in a manner that I can just outsource it to somebody else, it's only a matter of time before I can specify it in a manner that a program can write it and send it right back to me. Right? But what a program will find a hell of a lot harder to do is empathize with the person who has the need and be able to solve the problem for them. Right? That's a much more complicated emotional aspect that human beings have. That yes, eventually software will get there too, unfortunately, but not in the next 20, 30 years. Right? Not in our lifetime most, right? Certainly not in my lifetime, right? You guys have another 40, 50 years ahead of me, but not in that lifetime. So being able to empathize with the problem you're trying to solve, right? Actually marrying the problem, not just like saying, okay, God, it's another problem, what do you want me to do? I'll do it. If you want to do that, you're just waiting for your job to be programmed away, right? If you want to look at future, so another thing you have to keep in mind, software is a really tough job because in many other disciplines, when you get older, you get experienced and you become more valuable, okay? If you're a programmer and you're 45 years old, right now you're probably programming in COBOL if you're 45 years old, right? Most people, because that's what they program when they started. So in the software industry, when you become 45 years old and you're a programmer, you're an expensive, slow programmer, basically. Because you can't compete with the 20-something-year-old who's knowledgeable with the latest, greatest, whatever the hell it is. It might be, anyway, I won't name all kinds of crazy JavaScript shit that we live in today. Whatever the heck the latest, greatest thing is, and they can produce it 10 times faster, and they have no life, and they're willing to spend 18 hours a day working on it because they have no other responsibilities, right? So in order to beat that, There's only one way to beat that, is to increase the value, that increase insight, increase creativity, increase your ability to empathize. Because that's the experience part that you got to bring to computer science. Right? In medicine, experience is looking at the patient and knowing what their problem is before they even tell you the symptoms. Right? A really good doctor, you tell 2 symptoms, they know what their problem is, they'll detect it just like that. It's a damn good pattern matching engine, basically. Right? A good doctor. Now, of course, Watson will challenge that too. But in computer science, age is actually a negative aspect for many of us. The way you can turn into a positive aspect is to convert that experience into something valuable, right? Which is insight, which is the ability to see through problems before other people see through the problems, and so forth. By the way, there's a really nice article somebody had written, a blog someone had written called "What Does It Mean to Be a Senior Engineer?" Right? If you haven't read this blog, you should go read it. Just Google for "What does it mean to be a senior engineer?" It's a superb blog about the need to become able to operate in a fuzzy environment, the need to be able to live in a requirements-free world, the need to be the need to be adaptive and intelligent and empathetic and so forth. Those are the things about being senior. Okay? So my advice for people is, if you want to become successful as an engineer, and if you want to look at the future of Sri Lankan software engineers, the opportunity for us is awesome because we don't have a numbers problem to deal with. We have a small number of people. So we can improve the quality of the small number of people much easier than you can improve the quality of a large number of people. The problems Sri Lanka faces, despite having crappy governments, are tiny compared to problems that big countries face. Because we have only 20 million people, we have only one physically small location, we only need 3 roads and we don't need any more roads, right? All kinds of stuff like that. We have so many things that are so easy to solve. So if you look long term and look at how you can be a valuable person and how you look at your future, the key thing is just always, never sort of settle with anything. So I have this thing that I like to tell people, which is this concept of being dispassionately passionate. So I'm very passionate about what I do, and I will argue with anybody about stuff that I do, about whether it's right or wrong. I have a position on it, and I'll take a position and I'll argue. At the same time, I'm very dispassionate about it. That is, you have to be willing to let that go and say, shit, that was wrong, I'll do something else. Right? Whereas if you're not, if you're not passionate, you're very boring. It's like, oh, you'll do whatever somebody else tells you to do. People who are passionate are very interesting because it's much more interesting to work with them because they believe in what they want to do. Right? At the same time, they're so stubborn with their belief, you can't work with them because you can't move them around at all. They're stuck, right? They're stuck in the mud. They're stuck in their beliefs. So dispassionately passionate is a good balance, which is you're really passionate, but you're willing to back off of it, right? And get on to some other bandwagon because that's the right thing to do, or learn something, or move on to something else, right? So on a long-term basis, it is very important to keep learning continuously. You never stop learning. And today there's no excuse. The only excuse is you. Sleep 1 hour less, watch no TV, whatever you got to do, right? Take the time to learn what's going on in the world. Always be connected to everything that is going on in the world. Learn to be empathetic. Learn to become more senior. Right? Learn to live in a more fuzzy world. Learn to accept that the world is not so fixed. And keep in mind, if it is so fixed, it's going to get programmed away. Right? And get into the world which is going to be programming the world away, because that's the world. There's another great article, by the way, called "Software is Eating the World," written by Mark Andreessen. Again, this is like 6 or 7 years old now, but it's a really good article, and it's talking about how software is effectively taking over all things in life. Right? So it's called "Software is Eating the World." Mark Andreessen, by the way, is the guy who wrote the Netscape, and is one of the leading venture capitalists in the US now. He's a pretty smart guy. So I'll leave you with this idea that the opportunity for Sri Lankan developers is really good, because we don't have that many developers, which is good. We have a language advantage. We have a geographic advantage. We have a really good environment. Sri Lanka is a much better environment, despite problems that we have too. It's a much better environment than many other places, especially in this part of the world. And we have an opportunity to take on challenges and continuously learn and be part of the entire world's future. And and what I want everybody to do is don't ever let anybody tell you, well, no, those are too hard problems, you need to be somewhere else to do that, because that is not true. And don't ever set your sights too low. Okay, so there's no reason why the next Facebook, the next whatever, cannot come from Sri Lanka, right? Or it cannot come from some other place. Everything has a future. You know, if you go back 10, 15 years, there's something called MySpace. I think many of you probably never heard of it. MySpace was almost as big as Facebook is today, right? And it went away. Now it's still there, but it's basically gone. Things move on. In the technology world, things move on very, very fast because the barrier to entry is much lower. So if people create something interesting, it takes off very, very fast. So the opportunity is there. So work hard. Don't ever, if you want to be successful, you can't take it easy. There is no taking it easy bit. And be passionate. If you care about something, fight for it and take the time to really become an expert. And remember, this is a long-term project, right? Don't expect, people get stuck on, oh, I'm a senior engineer, I'm an associate tech lead, I'm a tech lead, all this crap about titles. This has no meaning in the real world, right? You want to get yourself a title, register a company, call yourself CEO, problem solved, right? And you can give whatever other titles you want to. You can be chief architect, I gave that to myself. I was chairman for a while, I gave that to myself too. Hey, that's the easy part, right? Then you're done with that part. Then you think long term, saying, okay, what makes me click? What makes me tick? How do I keep going? And figure that out, and figure that out internally, and execute with that. All right, thank you very much.
So once again, I thank Sanjiva. Thanks for your excellent thoughts and your valuable time allocating us. All right, so we have reached the end of Dev Day 2016, but still we have yet some announcements to make. While we are having the Dev Day 2016 here, we have another interesting session going on in another room. That's a kids can code. So we picked a bunch of kids and we let them code, and our guys were training them. So let's see, there's a small one here. Let's ask her actually what she learned and what she did during the session.
Hello, I'm Ravindi Samarasinghe. I'm in grade 6. My school is St. Bridget's Convent, and I learned a lot from kids coding, and it's very it's good, and I can learn a lot with my friends, and I thank Dev Day and all the teachers and aunties who helped me over here. Thank you.
Thank you. So now it's time for the gifts. So I have the names of the winners of the games. So the first morning tea break winners of the quiz, I asked Sanjiva on stage to gift them. The first place goes to Kasun Karunaratna. Second gift goes to Chanaka Gamage. Thank you, Sanju. And the gifts for the evening tea break sessions, I asked Jonas to be on stage to give the gifts. The first gift goes to Luke Gomez. And the second gift, Mahesh Livera. Okay. Thank you, Jonas. So the third exciting gift, that's for the best tweet of the event. I call Justin to come here and announce the winner of the best tweet.
Yeah, the winner is Chatunga, right? Rajit Chatunga, is that correct? He's over there. I think you have to come up. And the reason that you won was that it was your tweet with the cakes. So you deleted everything but the cakes in the picture. So that's the reason.
Thank you, Justin. So now it's the time for the biggest gift of the event. That's iPhone 7. The winner is Chintaka Peters. I call Milan from Hitachi Data Services sponsoring the gift of the conference. Chintaka Peters. The launch of the iPhone is officially will be in Sri Lanka is tomorrow, so he will get the real phone by tomorrow by coming to ExileSoft in the evening. Thank you. So we are at the last few minutes of the conference. So how you guys all enjoy the conference? Just make some noise. Did you enjoy? Okay, thank you. So I'll take another privilege to thank our sponsors. We have our platinum sponsors, ICT Norway, alongside with always ExileSoft being the platinum sponsor of DevDay. And our gold sponsor, Tata Communications. Our silver sponsors, Pro Account, Lanka Limited, WSO2, and Hitachi Data Services. Our standard sponsors, IIT, Mobitel, and the FireEye. And I thank our speakers, Justin and Jonas, all the way from traveling from Norway to attend this event, and Rafiq from Australia to having such a great session on HoloLens, and Kapil about a very viral session, I would say, dressed like a chef. That's so viral, actually. So I thank every speaker, and a special thanks once again for Sanjiva sharing the excellent thoughts with us. And I thank all of you for attending the DevDay and being such a successful, and I thank all the organizers having their hard and sweat all the 3+ night that I have seen with them. So I thank the organizing team, a special thanks and a big applause to them for the organizing team. So with that, we are closing DevDay 2016. See you next year. Thank you. Thank you very much.